I'm jumping on here today to really quickly sew with you the Made for Mermaids Avery top. I had a reader request doing a little sew along to show specifically the neckband and the arm bands. And so I wanted to go over that with you. So to start, make sure you cut out your pattern pieces, that you have a stretch needle in your machine. I'm going to be showing you this today all on my regular sewing machine. I'm not going to use my serger today. You certainly can, but I'm just going to assume that you're using only a sewing machine today. And your scissors and your thread, and let's get started. So you want to begin and make sure that you've cut out all your pattern pieces. I'm going to show you all the different pieces here that I have already cut out. Okay, so what we have here is the front, 2 back pieces, 1 neckband, and 2 arm bands. Again, make sure that you've cut those out according to the pattern instructions. And we're going to begin by taking our front piece, which is right here, and laying it face up with the right side up on the table. That's step number 1. The next thing you want to do is take one of your back pattern pieces, and mine definitely has a right side and a wrong side. So I'm going to lay my right sides together, and I'm going to match this side underarm seam, right sides together. On this side, make sure it all lines up here on the edges, and then this shoulder seam should go across because you're going to be making that twist. So go ahead and pin or clip your edges of side number 1. Okay, now you want to take your second back piece, and again, right sides together. Sorry about that. You want to find that underarm seam. You can kind of see the shape of it, okay? And you're going to lay it down and match it. Match up your underarm seam, pin it all the way down the side. Take your other shoulder seam piece and lay it going across. And go ahead and pin or clip those together now as well. So you should currently have it clipped together down both side seams and at the shoulder seams, making sure this piece crosses. Right now, the center back is left open. So we're going to take it over to our machine and use a 1/2 inch seam allowance to sew all these areas that we pinned. So I'm going to start sewing with the shoulder seams. You could be stabilizing this with a piece of clear elastic if you were worried about your top stretching out while wearing it. This particular top I'm making for my daughter. It's really cheap fabric, I'm not going to lie, and it's not something she'll probably wear for a really long time. So I'm kind of doing this a little bit quick today for you. But if it was some really nice fabric and you didn't want to waste it, not that I'm wasting it, but if you wanted to make sure it was going to last, you certainly could do that. I have my machine set on a slight zigzag. I wish I could tell you a specific measurement. My machine is so old, it doesn't easily let me know that. So I have lined it up. This is a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to go ahead and using that zigzag stitch and my stretch needle, I'm going to sew right sides together. There's one side. I'm going to go ahead and repeat on the other shoulder seam. Now, if you get twisted around like this when you're working, just go ahead and lay it back flat. Okay, back to where you started, where you were pinning. Put the front piece down facing you, and you'll see it kind of all lays back out, and you can kind of get your bearings and back together where you want it to be. Okay, now we're going to move to our side seam, and we're going to go from under the arm all the way down to that bottom hem, using a 1/2 inch seam allowance as well. I'm going to turn it over, do the other side seam, starting, I like to stitch my seams all going in the same direction. So my last one I started under the arm going down, I'm going to start this one under the arm going down as well. So after you've been sewing, it can kind of get all twisted back up again, and sometimes it's hard to see where you left off. So what I like to do is just come back, and again, I can tell these are my back pieces because they're just halves, and I can tell this is my front piece. And I'm just going to kind of lay this back out again like I was pinning in the beginning, with that front piece facing me. Then I'm going to fold in my two back pieces on top of it so it's all right sides together again. Just so I can kind of get a feel for this top. The twist can get confusing, so I'm going to straighten out my straps, make sure nothing is twisted before it's supposed to be here, so everything is laying flat. My back piece is laying flat. Side seams are over there. All right. Okay, so I have it all folded, put back the way it goes. This seam, this back seam is still not sewn together. Okay, this top neck area is still not sewn together. So I'm going to take my two arm bands and I'm going to press these wrong sides together in half lengthwise. Okay, so now we need to quarter our armbands. And all this means is you're going to be finding the center point of the band and then the center of that point from the middle to the edge. So I like to do this on my ironing table if I can. First I press the band in half, wrong sides together like you were supposed to. You can see that here. Then I pressed it once in half, and this tells me my first part to mark. Now I like to mark mine with a pin. You could use a clip. I just find the pin stays in a little bit better. After I have that part marked, I'm going to take that and now fold that in half again. Upon folding that on half, I have my two other points that are my quarter points. So I now evenly can distribute this band. So when I open it back up, I should have 3 pins. This marks my center and the 2 quarter points. Okay, now we're going to move back over to our top. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing, and I kind of have to stop and think through this every time when I'm on this step. So you have these notches that you cut into the pattern. This is going to be that one at about the center back. And this is going to be that notch further up towards the twist at the top. And when I think of this, I have to think, okay, I'm going from this notch by that twist. I'm working my way around the underarm, and I'm going to come back around to that notch on the other side of the twist. And so I'm going to take my one twist, I'm going to take my one notch, which is up higher by the back, and I'm going to be thinking about this in my head when I line it up, that, okay, I'm working my way around to this notch on the other side, okay? And I'm going to line up those notches and just put a pin in them while I think about this, right? So now, if I pick this up, it's going to show you, okay, there's that armhole that I'm attaching this band to. Now it makes a little bit more sense. I can see the armhole clearly, and I can figure out how to quarter this section. So I have those 2 notches lined up and pinned. Now I'm going to pull it straight out from each other, and now I have the other side over here, which is showing me that halfway mark. So I'm going to put my pin over there. That's showing my halfway point. And now I'm going to take my 2 pins and I'm going to bring them together to find that quarter point. Now, for me, on these Averys, that has usually been that underarm seam area. May not be exact for you, but usually mine is pretty close to the underseam allowance and then on top of it in half. So what I typically do, if I'm being honest here, I usually kind of cheat and I just lay it flat, pull out those 2 pins that I made, lay it flat. I find where this seam is, and I know that counts as 1, and then the one right across from it is my other quarter point. And I actually don't even put a pin in this one, but you certainly could to mark it. So now again, I have my beginning and end points where those notches are, and then I have 1, 2, 3 pins. Let's just throw a pin in here to make this make more sense. There's my 1, 2, 3 pins, which are going to match up with my 1, 2, 3 pins in the band. So now I'm going to find that raw edge, okay, not the one folded in half, but the one that you could open up, that raw edge, and I'm going to match it to the raw edges of the arm. So I'm going to go back to where the 2 started, and I'm going to open this up, and I want to match right sides together. So I'm just going to line up my armband, again, raw edge out, raw edge of the shirt, line them up, and I'm going to pin them or clip them. That's our starting point. Now we have to slightly stretch the armband so that when you're wearing it, it's going to pull it into your body. This is where all of this pinning is going to line up. So I'm just going to follow this right sides together. I'm looking, okay, I've got 1 pin here. I have 1 pin here. That's my first set that I'm going to line up those 2 pins, keeping raw edges together and pin them. Okay, that's pin number 1. I'm going to keep going around. Here is pin number 2 in my band. I need to keep going around this arm. Did my pin just fall out? Yes, it did. Okay, good thing I have it pressed. Sorry for the pause there. I'm going to keep going around my armband. And luckily I could see my line where I pressed it with my iron because my pin just kind of popped out. Okay, that's pin number 2. I'm going to keep working my way around. I'm turning the top as I go because I need to keep it right sides together. Now I'm going to line up pins number 3. Take this one out. Use just 1 pin. And then I'm going to keep going around till I'm back to that L little cutout notch. That's where I want my band to end. I'm going to pin it there and match raw edges together. And now I'm going to take this to my machine and I'm going to sew from pin to pin to pin to pin all the way around, right sides together, using that 1/2 inch seam allowance on this band. Now you can see the band is slightly shorter than the fabric of the bodice and the back. So I do need to stretch slightly the band fabric only to fit. I do not want to stretch the fabric of the top. So let's go to the machine and I'll show you what this looks like. Okay, so this just tends to kind of twist up. It's just the nature of this top. You just kind of have to keep turning until everything is facing the right way. So now I'm looking at my pieces that I just pinned. They are right sides together, the raw edges over to the side. I'm going to line this up in my machine starting at that 1 notch. I'm going to line it up, 1/2 inch seam allowance. And to begin, I don't usually stretch my band or anything at all. I'm gonna begin stitching with my stretch stitch, and I'm going to back stitch as well to lock that. And now that I've gotten past that first pin point, I'm gonna find the next pin on my band, okay? And I have my bodice fabric and the back fabric down touching the machine, and I have the band up on top. And I'm gonna take my band piece and just kind of stretch it to fit here. It shouldn't be a huge stretch. I would almost say that this is stretched further than normally is for me, and it could just be this fabric, but this fabric tends to roll. It's not the easiest to work with, so if you have a little bit more stable of a knit here, better quality, it's going to be a little easier for you. So now I've kind of stretched just my band only to this pin, and I'm going to stitch it. And I can tell you already, because my fabric kind of curls, I'm kind of having to cheat this seam allowance over here a little bit. It's kind of going closer to the 3/8 inch mark, and I know that's because my fabric is just kind of curling in on itself there. I'm losing about 1/8 of an inch. So sometimes I will just kind of keep my eye on this outside piece instead and use that as my guide when I have difficult fabric like this to work with. Okay, so now I've removed that pin, and I'm going to stitch now to my next pin. Now you want this band to end at this notch. So I'm going to stretch my band slightly to fit. Back stitch. Okay. I'm going to take it out of my machine. I want it to be pressed down towards the rest of the shirt, the bulk of the fabric, because we're going to come back and top stitch that down to hold it. So it should look about like this when you fold it to the right side. Go ahead and press that now. Okay, after I've pressed it, now I'm bringing it back over to my table. I'm going to place it back again, right side up, that center front, right side up, fold everything back on itself here. Make sure I'm looking good. Untwist that band. Okay, and you can see I went from this notch all the way around that arm's eye back to this notch, and I attached that band. So now doing your second band the same way on the other arm side should theoretically be a little bit easier, because now you're not trying to decipher, well, which side goes to which one. Now when you do your armband on the other side, you can kind of see, okay, I know I have this notch that nothing's attached to, and I know it has to go around this arm opening, and it's got to go back to, you know, the other notch that we had cut out. There's only a couple options here. So you're going to do it the same way that we did on the other side. You're going to pin those two notches, right sides together, and begin finding, you know, put those together, pull it out, find your middle point, and then your quarter points, mark them on your band, line it up, do all the same steps that I just showed you before. Go ahead and do that now. Okay, we've gotten to our points with our bands that we've attached both of them. We've pressed the excess seam allowance to the wrong side, and now you could use a twin needle here, but I'm actually going to use that honeycomb stitch that I really like because I just think it's easy. I can do it from either side. It doesn't really matter, and I'm going to catch my fabric. I know that, and it's just a great decorative, easy stitch. So I'm going to show you on my machine how I set that up. Now I'm actually going to do it on this fabric on the right side, even though I don't need to, because I'm lazy and I'm not changing my thread colors. And the closest thread I even have is this kind of bright pink thread for this. So I'm going to lower my camera here a little bit. Now on my machine, it's a specialty stitch. I have to choose which side my needle goes on and everything. And then basically, I'm just going to kind of make sure that that excess seam is lying down flat behind this. This is nice and pressed. I'm not stretching this out again. Otherwise, I'm going to get a really wonky seam when I'm done. And I'm just going to kind of slowly start, especially with this thin fabric I'm working with. And I'm just going to stay right here next to this seam. I'm just going to be stitching right along next to it. There it is from the back side. So now this fabric's not going to roll out over. And there it is from the right side. And you're going to go ahead and repeat this step on the other. We've got both of our armbands attached and top stitched. So we're back on our cut table here. I'm going to be turning this back, same thing. Just go back to the beginning, right side up with the front, cross your straps back over, hold these center back pieces back onto themselves here, fix your straps. So make sure these arms are not twisted like that. Just put it all back flat, just like you're going to be putting it on. Okay, just kind of pretend. So lay it all out. Make sure nothing's twisted up, okay? Everything's lying flat here. And again, you should be seeing all of your seams because everything is wrong side facing you. You should be seeing all of your stitching. Your top stitching should be on the underside here. So make sure everything is lying with wrong side now facing you here. And you're going to find that center back notch. I'm going to be doing the closed back top. So I'm going to just kind of open this up and find those 2 points on my center back, and I'm going to clip or pin these together from that point where those 2 meet all the way down here. I can get this in my hand, all the way down to the bottom. These should line up for you. So now I've got the bottom seam clipped together. Let's kind of straighten this back out again. Okay, nothing weird here. No funny twists yet. This one is going to be a little bit funky now because I've got that pinned underneath. Okay, so now I need to go up at the top, and the easiest way to see what I'm talking about is basically from where your armband stops to the top by the neckline. There's this section of fabric that there's nothing been done to it yet. That is the top above the twist. So all I want to do is turn so that I'm working with the right sides of the fabric, and I have to kind of turn and twist these together so that the right sides are now touching. I'm not sure if you kind of saw that. Everything was laying flat. Here it is on this side. Here it is on this side, and I want to put these together right side. So to do that, I do kind of have to open it up a little bit. I got to kind of get that twist going just a bit so that these will be right sides together. If I don't do that, there's no way to sew them right sides together and your twist will not work. So while it's lying here, it's going to look a little bit awkward. Go ahead and use your 1/2 inch seam allowance, and as you do it, you kind of want to open this up and make this as straight as possible while you're stitching that together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and same with down below the twist. You kind of want to open it up and stitch it in as straight a line as possible all the way down to the bottom. So we finished sewing the twist sections together up at the top and below, and you can see it should have made your twist in the back. And you can kind of get the feel, if you did it right, these strap pieces are not twisted at all. It's just right here in the back. So now we're gonna go and turn this right side out. There's my iron again. We're going to turn this right side out, and now we're going to attach the neckband. So to attach the neckband, you're going to fold this in half, right sides together, and you're going to stitch using a 1/2 inch seam allowance and then press it open. Okay, and just like before, I went back and I pressed it wrong sides together, so now I have the right side facing out. I pressed it in half lengthwise. I used my machine to press in my 1/4 points and my 1/2 point, but we can go ahead and do that without our iron too. You're going to lay that flat and find your center back seam, and I'm going to mark it with a pin at the front, and then my 2 corner pieces make my 1/4 points. So now I have my spots all marked. My 4th one is the center back one, but we'll go ahead and put a clip on it. So we have this quartered into 4 pieces. We're going to do the same thing on our front and back. So the way I like to do this is hold my top up, and I'm going to kind of pull my shirt out at the sides till my center back seam there meets the front, and that's going to kind of show me. These are my 2 1/4 points on the shoulders, and this one directly across from the middle back is the center front. So I'm going to put a pin or a clip at all of those points. Sorry for my screaming children in the background. My 3-year-old just woke up from his nap, so trying to get this done. Okay, now I'm going to take my band and I'm going to line up that raw side to the raw edge. I like to put my seam in the back and line it up at the back, so I'm going to take the opposite side, which is the front, line those 2 right sides together, and just match my clips all the way around. Okay, it's all clipped together. Again, your neckband should be slightly smaller than your shirt. You're going to slightly stretch only the band as you sew this on. If you would like, I suggest using a basting stitch first to make sure your stretch is correct, and then going back and stitching it together. Okay, I'm starting in the back of the shirt. I have the right side of the top facing me and the band on top. I'm going to start stitching together where these seams meet up. I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm stretching only the band as I go. And I'm just moving along from clip to clip, stretching only that amount of fabric as I go. Okay, once I get back to where I started, just gonna do kind of a check here, make sure quality control. I'm gonna do the same thing that I did with my armbands, which is we're gonna press this extra seam allowance in towards the rest of the shirt, top stitch this after it's pressed, and we'll be close to being done. When I do my top stitching, again, I like to start in that center back seam. It just kind of gives me a little wiggle room if I mess up or anything like that. With your top stitching. The top stitching, I feel like, is the key of this top to really get this twist to lay down. Now, I did not tack any of mine like they talk about. And from what I've seen from people, it's a little bit difficult to get this to lie exactly how you want it to lie and tack it on yourself. So because this top is for my daughter, I certainly could do it, but I personally have found that after a press and the top stitching that I have not needed to tack any of mine down. It does twist a little bit on me, but nothing that bothers me. Okay, your last step is just going to be to turn under your hem allowance, the 1/2 inch, and stitch it with your top stitch of choice. I'm going to choose to use a stabilizer in mine. I'm going to use this Soft and Stretch by Heat and Bond. This is 5/8 inch. I don't have a 1/2 inch, so my hem allowance is going to be a little bit bigger than what you're supposed to take. But all you have to do to use this is press it onto the wrong side, right along that hem. Turn it up, or I'm sorry, peel the backing off, then turn it up and press it. It will hold it in, and then you can go ahead and turn it over and do all your top stitching. Okay, I have my hem all turned under, and my final step is just to top stitch this. I'm going to finish my pattern off using that same honeycomb stitch, but you could use the twin needle here. And that's that. You just give it a final press, clip all your threads away, which I haven't done yet. There's my bottom hem after I've pressed it. You can see the top stitching in there, and I just think it hangs really well. And that's it from the front and from the back, and I'll show it on my daughter. And here is the final product, and you can see there's the hem. Here's a close-up of the arm and neck bands. Now my fabric does not have great recovery, and you can see it's kind of rolling just slightly. So obviously if you have a little bit nicer quality fabric there with more recovery, and then turn around. And here's the back, if you can kind of move your hair. There's your bands, and you can see the cross there and how it hangs. Now again, I did not tack mine. I have not tacked any of them, but you could have this on your model right here and kind of watch in the video that Catherine provided how you can kind of tack that. I personally like the way it looks better without it. I just kind of think it's this natural little bit of a twist. It does kind of open underneath here. If you went in, you can see the opening, and that is completely normal and part of the pattern. And there it is. I hope you enjoyed this sew along for the Made for Mermaids Avery top. Until next time, what do we say? Bye. No, happy sewing. Say, happy sewing.
Happy sewing.